Good morning. I'm Lawrence Geller, the founder of For Advisors Only. Welcome to the Meet the Masters Insurance webinar series. This is the 17th, what we expect to be a great many webinars with Canadians who've dedicated their careers to learning the art and science of insurance sales and service. Webinars in this series are now scheduled through the end of this year, and more are being added to the schedule regularly. Over the years, I've observed that every successful insurance agent whom I've met has succeeded differently, even if they're in the same field, deal with similar clients, and even if they're related or in business together. This is what makes the sale and servicing of insurance one of the best careers that I can imagine. It is possible to become a success in our business with diligence, integrity, and experience. With this webinar series, we intend to prove that any type of person can succeed with time and hard, thoughtful work. Our goal is to create a video record for each of these masters of insurance so that some of their expertise and experience will be available to anyone who'd like to learn from them in the future. Today, we have Micheline Varas with us. Micheline joined Customplan in 1994. She is both a senior managing partner and an independent advisor. Micheline works in conjunction with several insurers, their respective underwriters and reinsurers, and is a consulting resource to advisors, institutions, high net worth clients, and corporate clients. She has grown her practice and that of others by focusing on intellectual interplay, the collaboration of specialist expertise. She structures creative, cost, and tax-effective risk mitigation strategies for clients and plays an integral role in achieving solutions for those deemed difficult to insure. Micheline was the first recipient of the GBDS, Group Benefit Disability Specialist designation in Canada, and is a founding moderator of the Canadian Initiative for Elder Planning Studies. She heads Customplan's Living Benefits Division, as well as ACT, Advanced Consultancy Team, assisting advisors to achieve best-of-class solutions. She's a top-of-the-table member. Micheline has penned industry and non-industry publications. She's held training and educational events and spoken at international congresses, such as the MDRT and Top of the Table. She was named one of the top 50 women of influence in the Canadian insurance industry in 2014. I will be interviewing Micheline. We have now booked webinars through the end of September 2024 and are still booking new webinars. If you know of anyone who might be a master of insurance who we haven't yet contacted, please let me know and just send me an email or a text and we'll get in touch with them. Good morning, Micheline. Thanks.
Good morning, Lawrence. Thanks for having me.
It is
I think I fit your category of anyone can do this in our industry. So I guess I'm the anyone.
With hard, diligent, thoughtful work. There's always a caveat. And tell me, how did you get started in the insurance business?
Like many and unlike many, I didn't plan to come into the industry. I was actually a translator by profession, which was rather tedious, very time consuming. And when I had my first child, their dad convinced me that I should take time off and be a mom, which is incredibly honorable. But after years and years and years of education, I didn't know that I could actually spend 24/7 at home with my child. Sounds awful. I adore my kids. I actually live for my kids still. So I convinced him to allow me the opportunity to have, and sorry, not to be demeaning at all, but my words then were a mindless or less tedious job with an insurance company. So I then started with Citadel and in the administration side, and learned very quickly that that was not my forte. And my boss at the time convinced me that I should look to disability insurance and work with advisors who were focused on that part of the industry. And it made a lot more sense to me to look to disability insurance because I was in my 20s and life insurance seemed so far from my realm of understanding and appreciation. I was too young at the time to even really want to focus on what would happen if I were to pass or the father of the kids were to pass at the time. But becoming disabled played into my control freak factor. So I could understand having something in place that would allow us to retain control of our life, of our lifestyle, should something happen inadvertently.
So you then started working with licensed agents?
Um, I did. Well, it eventually sort of went down that route. I was told that in order to teach, you have to sell, which I understand probably a lot better now than I did then. I started basically by memorizing the disability contracts that were available in the marketplace. Uh, I I held true in those days a quote. My father had spoken to me about a quote from Walt Disney, which was, "Whatever you do, do it well. Do it so well that when people see you do it, they'll want to come back and see you doing it over and over again, and they'll want to bring others and show them how well you do what you do." So that was sort of the premise or the method behind the madness. So I studied and dissected the different contracts available so that I could at least speak semi-intelligently about them and be able to compare and contrast. And then realizing that I would have to go into sales, and that was not something that sat very well with me. I didn't know that I would be particularly good in the sales portion. I began to meet with advisors because at the time and even now, the stats were that only about 20 to 25% of all Canadian advisors or agents were selling disability insurance. For all of the reasons that still exist today, it was very tedious. The underwriting was very long. There were a lot of definitions and so on and so on. It seemed too costly. The questions were rather invasive. They would have to deal with their clients' financials and know how to read them, which many didn't do, especially in those days. And so I would meet with different advisors, explain the different concepts to them, and then apply for the job of being their disability insurance specialist. And from there, it extrapolated. So, yes.
And when did you get your license?
Oh my goodness, really, Lawrence? I want to say 1992, I believe, but didn't really do much with it until about 94. And that's when I really started to focus on the collaborative work.
Okay, so we've jumped ahead of it. We're still back at Constellation, I guess. So Constellation, what did you see your role as developing to? You just said you changed the role to start to become collaborative. Where did you see it?
It wasn't actually Constellation. It was with Citadel at the time. No, it's okay. What did I see my role? I saw my role as assisting an advisor to best position a disability plan in the realm of the life insurance programs that they were already putting forth for their clients.
Okay. And were you dealing with agents who were already dealing with Constellation? Or
Yes, at the time, the advisors were Citadel.
sorry,
No, it's okay, it's okay. They were Citadel advisors. And then my then boss moved to a company that offered property casualty insurance as well as the life and health and marine coverage. And so I worked very closely with he and the advisors within that realm. That company decided to get rid of their life and health component. And we were luckily situated in the same building as Paul Brown was when he had IBG, the independent brokerage group. And so Paul just said, come on board. And so I was working with Paul within that disability realm. And then from there, introduced to Carl at Customplan and so on.
Okay, so you really moved from an insurance company to the MGA, or what was becoming the MGA world,
Exactly.
in an advisory capacity.
In an advisory capacity.
And did you find that you had to go looking, or you started bringing new agents in?
That's an interesting question. Initially, no. And you asked me about my license, and it wasn't until I started with Customplan in 1994 that Carl Krakosinski, who now may as well be my brother because we've worked together for 30 years, but at the time was just the guru of this MGA anyway, very reputable in the industry. And he was a top of the table advisor at the time. And I had no understanding of what that meant in the world anyway. He is the one who actually instilled in me that you cannot train, you cannot really assist advisors unless you are doing this yourself. So you will have to start selling. And to me, that was very, very foreign. I was raised in a world where we didn't discuss money and we didn't try. So to try and sell to what was supposed to be my natural market was not going to be a happening thing. So I decided that in order to be able to have any semblance of sales, I would have to look to doing it a little bit differently. And as we were then part of what was called Equinox, so there were a number of advisors underneath that umbrella. So I just looked to the individual disability concepts, and there were several, and would just go down the list of advisors. So I would start with one concept and go through all of the list of advisors, walk them through the concept, use their parameters as an example to the concept. So of course, Lawrence, if I need to speak to you and explain to you the benefits of disability overhead expense policies, I'm going to use you as an example just so that you can see and appreciate the numbers. And of course, Lawrence, you can't share this with your clients because they're going to ask you whether or not you have this coverage yourself. So you would then probably, as an advisor, look to getting your own disability overhead expense policy. I would help you to walk through the underwriting, et cetera, the positioning of the plan. And more often than not, advisors were saying, I really don't like this stuff. And I would then apply for the job of being their person, their go-to person.
Did you find that there was a specific type of agent, advisor, with whom that gained traction initially, like immediately?
Yes, those who were a little bit more open-minded. And I think that that's still true today. Many still think that they are capable of doing everything. They don't like to share. They don't want to lose control of their client. They feel that they are capable of making 100% of the commission themselves. So why would I ever bring someone in? there was the flip side to that coin where advisors would say, wow, I can now offer my client this much more. And the way in which you introduce yourself, Mish, and I would always introduce myself as working for the advisor, which would help enhance their personal image and their personal practice, because now their clients were looking to them as having larger breadth within their firms. They had specialists, obviously. So these advisors would say, you're enhancing my personal image. You're doing the legwork that I don't want to do. And at the end of the day, I just get a check. You're also asking my clients all of the difficult questions that I don't want to ask. And should their case be rated or declined, you're the bad guy and not me, right? So I think it's very, very dependent on the mindset of the advisor. And luckily, having had positive outcomes with certain advisors, it propelled them to do more. So then I would say, do you mind, Lawrence, now that you have asked me to work on such and such a client and we've had positive feedback, would it be possible then if maybe I look through a couple of your files and see if there's opportunity to do that much more? That way I'm not taking your time away from doing that. But if there are certain individuals who would meet the criteria, perhaps you can introduce me as your specialist and we could do the same going forward.
You alluded to the fact that individual disability underwriting requires a lot more knowledge about the client, a lot more information, often than individual life insurance for a similar related amount. Can you talk about your process? What did you have to learn to do to really become competent at helping clients to underwrite disability insurance?
First of all, I took several accounting courses, much to my chagrin, because again, as you said, there is a piece to the disability insurance world that is not necessarily the same in the life insurance world. And that's applicable both to field underwriters that we are, as well as to home office underwriters. So those who specialize in disability insurance actually need to know how to read financials. And so I took several accounting courses, and I was also very blessed to have people within our profession, whether they were home office based or not, take me under their wings and actually teach me. Very, very fortuitous. I've been blessed for all the years in the industry that people have taken time to teach, which is wonderful. It's all about paying it forward, but it's a beautiful way of doing that. So that was the first and foremost. And then I began interviewing home office underwriters, which I understand is something that no one had really taken the time to do. So I would phone the different insurance companies and ask whether or not I could set up meetings with both the life insurance underwriters and the disability insurance underwriters, many chief underwriters in the different companies, and ask them questions. What are you looking for? What specifically would allow you to position this in a more favorable light? How could I, as an advisor, structure a case so that I could expedite the underwriting process for you? Basically, how do I best serve you as an underwriter? And thereby learning quite a bit. When computers came to be, I now Google everything and everyone. So I look up the client, I look up their practice or their business, I look to their mission statement just so that I can understand their wordings and their language and what they choose to do or how they choose to portray themselves. And I think really studied on and studied language a lot. Again, I was a translator by profession, so language is very, very important to me. But studied language both from an underwriting perspective, what underwriters were looking to see, as well as how to speak to different people in different areas and arenas that would sound more like them as opposed to like me.
Well, that makes great sense. So continuing with the language of interpretation, how did the clients react to what agents perceive as the intrusive nature of individual disability underwriting?
I think it's a matter of explaining. I'm not here to look to selling or putting forth a product like a life insurance product that will pay a one-time amount upon your passing. That is the job of your advisor. I'm here to best position you so that in the event that you become ill or disabled, the insurance company will be able to provide you a continuing income of X dollars. For them to best be able to assess you as an individual, they have to understand how you earn your income. So we have to be able to validate that, because you want them to be able to say right away, yes, I understand how this individual earns his income, draws their income, et cetera, et cetera. They want to be able to be assured that you don't have too much in place, because that becomes an incentive for you to actually go back to work. They also want to know more particular things about you personally with respect to your lifestyle, as well as your health and your family history, because it's their job to do a complete assessment. Where it seems somehow invasive, I think we have to turn it around and say, this is actually quite a positive, because by the time they say, yes, you are approved for the coverage for which you've applied, you're never going to have to prove yourself again. And that's very, very important. You now know, once you're holding that policy, that should something happen, God forbid, the company will adhere to the promise it made you at the time that they actually assessed you. So I think it's a matter of explaining.
Continuing with the language of interpretation then. How did the agents, the advisors for whom you worked, react to the intrusive nature of disability underwriting?
I think that they hired me initially because I would do the intrusive underwriting and they didn't have to be involved. They didn't want to know if their client had had BLAT in the past. And there have been some embarrassing past situations that advisors were very, very happy not to have been privy of until after the fact, because of course they can see the application as well. And they said, glad you asked the question. I would have felt very embarrassed. So I think there were many who were very, very happy that I was taking on that part and they didn't have to get involved with it whatsoever.
There has been a perception, although I think the more expert you are at submitting an application and getting the information, the less relevant the perception is, the disability applications result in a high rate of declines. How have you dealt with the underwriting? Insurance companies need comfort in order to take a risk. No underwriter is ever blamed for saying, no, we're not going to take that risk. They're only blamed if they say we're going to take a risk and it turns out to be a bad one. How did you deal with the underwriting conservativeness, I assume that's a word, of insurance companies for disability?
It is what it is. I think that as advisors, we have to be just as concerned with the clients who are hoping to achieve coverage, for whom we're hoping to achieve coverage. We represent both the client as well as the insurance company. And we can't forget that that's our role and our responsibility. So in order to best position a client, we have to look to both sides of that coin. Our clients are twofold. So yes, I'm going to ask you all the questions. Yes, I'm going to look to lifestyle and to health and to finances. And yes, I'm going to do this the old school way because it is my job to know everything up front so that I can make you aware of potentials. So if a client is clearly a little bit too short for their weight, and has had certain situations, I can explain to them up front that this, first of all, the numbers are going to change. We will probably, I'm going to rerun numbers to perhaps make them a little bit closer to what may be expected, because I don't really believe in illustrations. I find them illusions until you really know the true assessment from the insurance company's perspective. So I ask all the questions, and that allows me to properly position a potential final decision with the client. That also allows me to position things with the underwriters. So I already know that they are taking this medication, this amount. However, they've been taking it for a number of years. They are 100% compliant. They have done this, this, and this to better themselves. They are on top of their personal physical health. They are being monitored and so on. And I think once we ask the questions effectively of our client, then we can have those conversations with our underwriter and work with them to achieve best results. Now, yes, there will be declines. Declines happen no matter what, but we have to be able to go back with, this is why this has been declined or postponed. Sometimes we know exactly, sometimes we don't. I am very similar to you, very fortuitous and having great relationships with underwriters and reinsurers. So often they will tell us things that they may not tell other advisors. Again, very fortuitous position, but that also does not allow us to communicate the exact reason to the client. We can give them a better idea and then perhaps look to the marketplace to see if there's something else that we can put in place just in case. It may not be as good a product, but at least it would be a solid Band-Aid solution in the event that something were to happen.
Let's stay on medical underwriting for just a second. Do you find that when the underwriter comes back to you and says there's a problem, we're having difficulty with underwriting this, we may not be able to issue, and they tell you essentially where the area is that there's a problem, do you find that sometimes it's just a question of providing more information, and what do you do about that?
Well, that would really depend on the decision and the reason. And yes, sometimes it's just a matter of providing more information. Sometimes the information within the APS or attending physician statement is not sufficient enough. Sometimes it's a matter of making a business deal. Would you consider perhaps shortening the benefit period, or extending the elimination period, or staggering the benefits, or excluding one piece for a certain time frame while providing something else. So yes, it's a negotiation that you can often have with an underwriter. Sometimes, again, depending on the size of the case, I've gone back to a client and said, you know, if you were willing to have an executive medical, which is very comprehensive, we would have sufficient enough information to provide to underwriting to be able to furnish them with what they need right here, right now. And I don't mind paying the $2,000 or $2,500 for the executive medical, but again, it depends on the size of the case. Same thing with accountants. I have no issue whatsoever in saying to a client, all of the information is there, all of the background is there, all of the cross references with CRA bulletins are there, resolutions are attached, everything is here for your accountant. However, I can anticipate your accountant still wanting to know A, B, C, D. If this is not sufficient, please ask that your accountant contact me directly, and I don't have an issue with paying for their hours, their billable hours, because I know exactly what they're looking for and I will be able to address that.
Noting just that depending on your province, you may want to speak with a compliance person to find out whether that might constitute rebating in your own province. In the Western provinces, BC and Alberta, it certainly doesn't. But in Ontario, we don't know yet. Misha, how over the years has the
That's not rebating, actually, Lawrence, with all due respect.
Oh, I'm
across
sorry.
in Ontario, I'm licensed in Ontario as well, because that is actually an accounting fee that I can incur to ensure that the plan that I'm putting forward is compliant from a CRA perspective as well as an insurance perspective. So that's how you get around that one.
You're paying the accountant for advice
If
to you.
I'm paying the accountant to give their opinion and they're okay, so that it works for our mutual clients.
So it's really a question of how you design the question that you're asking.
Yes.
So how has the information available to you over the years on what insurance companies are looking for, underwriting guides of some sort? How has that changed, and how has that changed what you do?
Okay, I'm sorry. You may have to rephrase the question as far as.
When was the first time you saw a medical underwriting guide for disability insurance?
Oh, wow. I didn't actually get my hands on a guide until I would say it was probably in the late 90s or early 2000s. Insurance companies would not release underwriting manuals or anything of the sort to advisors. That was like pulling teeth. You couldn't even get a build table from them. So again, I was quite lucky. Relationships go a long way. So I would be sent snippets of information. So if I would say, how would you look to type 1 diabetes, or how would you look to someone who was 5'3" and 170 pounds, or whatever it happens to be. And certain underwriters actually sent me snippets or clips, which I amassed. I still have a lot of the old ones, and those have changed significantly through the years. This is how we would look to this particular condition or this particular build, or these are rate tables that we sort of use as a guideline for this and this. But
now those underwriting manuals are available on the websites in many
they
cases.
they
How
are.
does that change things?
It changes a lot for some, and it doesn't change a lot for others. I had just as recently as yesterday, someone asked me, where could I get my hands on such and such a company's build table. And I said, why don't you go into their site and look it up? Oh, I didn't know that it was there. Well, yes, it's actually there. If you take the time to do homework, and I think many advisors are intrinsically lazy. Sorry, all due respect, but there is a lot of background work that we could be doing that would facilitate our overall jobs. And if we just took the time to look, to find, to use, and to study, things would be a lot simpler. So for me, I always say, the slower you go, the faster you grow. And it's, methodically take time to look and to do homework, and it will absolutely facilitate what you're doing and the business that you're putting together.
Let's stay in underwriting. We'll go back to financial for 1 second then. As I recall, for disability, income is defined as income earned for your personal services performed during any given period, whether it is beneficial, whether it is received by a third party, your private, your personal corporation, your professional corporation, your employer, or not, as long as it trickles down to you or you derive a benefit in some way. That with companies, particularly closely held companies, isn't always the easiest information to get, but it seems to be what you need for disability.
Absolutely.
How do you deal with that with clients who are very close chest, or whether they hold their cards close to their chest when it comes to money very often?
There is no question whatsoever. If you are hiring me to best serve you and best position you, this is what I will need. And I will need your corporate FinDocs of financial documents. I will need your personal T1 generals for the last 2 years. I will need your spouse's personal T1 generals for the last 2 years. If I don't have this criteria, and along with other things as well, but if I don't have that, then I cannot formulate a plan. This is not a matter of, I'm going to meet with you, I'm going to take an application on you based on what you've told me, and I'll substantiate it later when the insurance company asks me to provide your income or your financials and so on, and you say, I'm very sorry, but I'm not comfortable in doing that. That doesn't come into play. If I don't have it from the get-go, I'm out.
So you need enough information to make a recommendation to the client, which provides
Absolutely.
comprehensive individual disability coverage. We talked
Absolutely.
earlier about business overhead insurance. How does business overhead, in combination with individual disability insurance, improve the protection for a corporate client?
Well, that's probably the easiest question to answer. Lifestyle. If I were to become disabled, I know more or less what I need on a month-to-month basis to allow me to keep going while I do not have the ability to earn an income. So that's my individual disability insurance protection, my income replacement, so to speak. However, I also operate a business. I have staff, I have rent to pay or a mortgage if I happen to own the building. I don't. I have an office. So I have rent to pay, I have leases to pay, I have staff to pay, I have my business dues, etc., etc., etc. My overhead expenses are significantly high. If I were to look solely at the income replacement benefit that I receive in the event that I've become disabled and have to pay out a chunk to that just to keep my business afloat, I would not have enough to maintain my personal lifestyle. So you need both. One looks after you personally, and one looks after continuation of your business until such time as you can come back to work.
But you're still working, I believe, with a lot of individual producers through Customplan. How does all of this work that you do, figuring out how much disability, whether they qualify, what their finances look like, all the documentation that's needed for underwriting, how does that benefit the individual producers who you're working with when it comes to the other products that they're recommending?
Well, they're covered. If anything happens, they're covered. And they can also, again, if you're in a situation with a client, and I'm sure you've been in many a situation with clients where they say to you, Lawrence, do you have this product yourself? If you were to say no, you lose credibility. So I think with many of the advisors, just ensuring that they have their own financial house protected, it makes them more credible in the eyes of their clients, because our jobs is to ensure that we protect and best serve our clients in the event that they live too long, die too soon, become critically ill or disabled, right? That infamous three-legged stool. If we are not doing for ourselves what we are preaching, we're not necessarily credible. So ensuring that advisors have their own financial house in order, I think is a good step all the way across the board.
We haven't talked about, we didn't talk about this when we spoke the other day, but business overhead insurance also has another corollary, which is business buyout insurance. And that's in the event that something goes wrong for an extended period of time and the disability buyout gets triggered. How does that work? And what are the problems that you see with buyout agreements when it comes to disability buyout coverage?
Okay, so I think unlike you, I haven't seen a ton of buyouts. I know you have. I know you have, and you've certainly gone to bat with a number of the insurance companies to ensure that the buyouts that they are offering your clients are sufficient. Because sometimes initial offers don't look particularly pretty and don't seem particularly fair. And you are certainly well reputed for acting on your client's best behalf, and you've gone to bat with insurance companies to augment the buyout figure. You're known for that.
Just for clarity, I didn't ask the question well. Just for clarity, what we're talking about here is when you're on disability, it looks as though it's going to be an extended period. And the insurance company comes to you and says, you know, we're just going to treat you as though you're going to be disabled to 65. We'll offer you X amount of dollars. Go away. And the question is that a fair number? And that's what we're actually talking about now. Go ahead.
I have not had a lot of those. You have. I think when those situations arise, we have to put on our analysis paralysis hats on and number crunch. Because again, as advisors, we're not just looking to our clients to live until age 65. We are looking at protecting them for the duration of their life. So we need to be able to look to the number, the potential offer of the buyout, and see whether or not it makes sense in the overall plan that we have initially created for this client. And if it doesn't seem sufficient, fair, or right, then it is our duty and our responsibility to go back to the insurance company and say, sharpen your pencils because this is not working.
Now let's see if I can ask the question properly. Buy-sell agreements.
Oh, buy-sell.
Many
Okay.
businesses. There is buy-sell insurance, which I call buyout coverage, my apologies. And so buy-sell insurance, how does that fit in to, firstly, the disability package that you were talking about with clients who have partners or associates or other shareholders? And how does that fit into what the other advisors who you're working for are doing?
very few, as you know, actually do disability buy-sell coverage. Advisors are very, very good about asking certain questions, and it's typically, oh, let me see how, if I remember how we were taught. Ask your potential business owner client if they have a buy-sell agreement, and most of them say yes, and your next question to them should be, and how is it funded? Because that's supposed to be the sales tactic in there. Sounds all well and good. I think that I like the more human approach, and which is to just ask the question. You are obviously in business with this individual. You began the business together because you value one another's expertise. You are friends now, which is great, and life is going well. I believe that you probably have a shareholders agreement. Can you walk me through what that says? And I would rather have the person sitting across from me tell me what they believe that that agreement says than anything else. And if they just say, well, if Mish passes away, then Lawrence is going to buy her shares for $1 million. That's great. And, thank you for sharing that with me. But what happens if Mish doesn't pass? Can you talk to me what happens if that's not part of the equation? Is your agreement structured so that it addresses certain things? Something really simple. What happened? Are you thinking of eventually selling this business? Or are you thinking of dying with your boots on? So when does your potential retirement date trigger? Oh, well, we hadn't really thought about that, but if we do, it's probably going to be around this, and then we'll just take the money out of the business. Is that addressed within your shareholders agreement? Oh, are we supposed to address that? Not, not anything really invasive, just a very casual question. Um, I I understand that you are very good friends. So is it also part of the plan that should something happen to one or to the other, that you would continue this partnership with Mish's spouse? No, I actually can't stand Mish's spouse. I can say that very comfortably. I don't have a spouse, so I'm not insulting anybody. But I can't stand that person. They're not very good, or they're not knowledgeable in the business. Does your agreement speak to what happens in the event of a divorce, or in the event of no, is it supposed to? And sort of walk down the aisle, walk down the line to, okay, what then happens if she would become disabled? And yes, you both have disability insurance, and that's great, but this means that, Lawrence, you're going to be picking up the weight, and you're going to be carrying the business all on your own for how long, until you kind of say enough is enough? Have you addressed that that portion as well? And I think just lightly asking questions in a non-invasive way makes people think. Same thing with critical illness. A lot of individual advisors use CI as part of a buy-sell agreement, which can work if we do our jobs properly. And I started doing this years and years ago by absolute default, and it was one of the very, very first CI policies that I had sold. And it was sold to supplement disability buyout coverage. It was $1 million of CI coverage. It was in the early 2000s, unheard. Like, I was so excited because, as I said, it was one of the first ones. And not even 6 months into the policy having been put in place, I received a phone call from the client saying, "Hey, Mish, do you think this is gonna, that critical illness thing, do you think it's going to pay out? And I had my oh shoot moment, to be politically correct. And I thought, this person is thinking of canceling. And at the time, it was the largest CI policy I'd sold. They had just sort of come to pass. And I said, in the event of what? And he said, well, I had a heart attack. And I thought, oh my goodness, are you okay? And he says, oh yes, I'm fine. My doctor says I'll be back to work in about 10 days or so, but is that one of the covered conditions? And I said, I believe so. I'll send you some documents for your completion and we'll help walk you through this. And I received the documents back, contacted the insurance company, and lo and behold, yes, he was approved. And I said, could you please send me the check? Because I'd like to personally deliver it. Now, that was very selfish. I'd never seen $1 million check before. So that was really cool. So I wanted to see that. The client was in Calgary. I flew to Calgary. He had no idea I was coming. And I phoned him and I said, can I come by and see you? And I went by to see him. He was at the office and he said, whatever happened with that potential claim? And I said, well, good news, bad news. And he said, okay. And he says, what's the bad news? And I said, well, the policy is no longer in force. And he goes, oh. And he goes, well, then what's the good news? And I handed him the check. And he said, are you kidding me? And I said, no. And he goes, well, what do I do with this? Which was a brilliant question and actually opened the door to a lot of things, because we had never had it stipulated within the agreement as to how to use the money from a critical illness claim if it was not to be used at the time of claim for buy-sell purposes. So I said to him, I said, well, the money has now come into the corp. You have a discussion with the other shareholders. You can reinvest it, because at the end of the day, should something happen that you do need to use this, you want to have the capital. However, the shareholders may just want to have it paid out. We need to be able to do this. I then asked him for his lawyer's name, met with the lawyer and said, we have to now restructure the buy-sell agreement to incorporate the wordings of the CI and the what ifs. So what happens if this critical illness claim happens prematurely and they don't want to use it for this? What happens if they use it for something else, they buy out? Do we need to reinvest other monies? And what happens if they never claim and we have the influx of capital? How is that distributed? So that, as I said, sorry, it's a long story, opened up the doors to huge possibilities, because the lawyer then said, no one else has ever spoken to me about doing this, and we should relook at some of the agreements that we already have formulated to encompass some of these wordings. So it opened up a whole new arena.
You gave the lawyer a whole bunch of new precedents.
I did.
It sounds to me as though you spend an awful lot of your time when you talk with clients about what they want to have happen if, God forbid, something happens. Does that sound right? Is that what you do?
Absolutely. They're financial wants analysis, not a financial needs analysis. Bottom line, we probably all need significantly less than what we want. Needing something and wanting something are two different things altogether. And once you ask somebody what they want, you're opening up their emotional tract, their emotional feelings. You find out what they truly care about. Is it more important to them to make sure that their children are running to the Maserati dealership upon their passing, or is it more important to them to make an impactful difference to a particular charity, or is it more? It doesn't really matter. everyone has their wants, and I want to focus on the want before I look to the bare needs.
Do you find that when a client tells you what they want, and what they want is to solve this problem, that it improves the persistency, the time that the solution stays in effect?
Well, absolutely, but it also allows them to best understand the plan that's been put forward. So I was assisting an advisor, I guess it was about a month and a half or so ago, and we collectively met with his client on Zoom. Young fellow, lovely, and just started casually speaking because I would rather do that to ask what their wants were. This individual is actually 36 years old. He mentioned very casually that his father had retired at age 55. So it would be really cool to get the one-upmanship and retire at 54. He made a couple of comments like this. So by the time we sat down together and went through the plan, I said, this plan is structured as a 17-pay solution. All pieces of this were based on the 17-year window, which would allow him to pay the last premium or the last payment at his age 53. And he said, Mish, why is this 17 years? And I said, aren't you retiring at 54? You're not going to be paying. And he just beamed and he said, wow, you listened. And I said, of course, our plan is designed so that all of your wants are met, so that you and your wife can do this, this, and this with your business, because that's what you communicated. And you can achieve this, this, and this. We've positioned this and we've designed this to meet your wants.
So are you saying this has gone from being your plan to being his plan?
It is his plan. We just design it, but it's their plan. And as I said to this particular individual, you may fall out of love with your advisor, but if you understand and accept the plan that's been created, that doesn't matter. The plan is solid, and the plan will stay with you no matter what. You can change your advisor, but if the plan is in accordance to your wants, you'll never want to change your plan.
Okay, so let's talk briefly about what happens if everything goes to hell in a handbag, and we go back to the question of a claim. What do you see the agent's role as in a living benefits claim?
Wow. Living benefits claim, if you're not there to deliver the check, then you've really missed the boat. Specifically with living benefits, it is hugely important for us to take our duty, role, and obligation as advisors to our clients seriously. And when an individual becomes disabled or is stricken with a critical illness, they have a lot to deal with. They need to know that we have assisted them in looking after their financial well-being so that they can truly concentrate on their physical well-being.
Do you find that over time, the recommendations, the referrals from clients who've been on claim start to come in? And how do you find, I mean, is it immediate or does it take some time?
No, it's not immediate. It does take time, but they do come in for sure. They become incredible advocates to what we do. It wouldn't be immediate, Lawrence. I don't believe, because when an individual becomes ill or is stricken with a critical illness, they are truly focused on their physical health. And until such time that either a critical illness benefit is paid or the time that it takes for their income replacement policies to kick in and to start generating an income, they don't truly take the time to appreciate the fact that they are protected and that they don't have to worry. But when that becomes a norm, whether it's receiving DI paycheck after DI paycheck, or that lump sum amount, whether it's small or large, makes no difference because it goes a long way. And they have a little bit of financial breathing room. That's when they start to make favorable introductions to others.
Thank you. What advice would you give to someone new, someone younger, whether they're coming into the business or not?
You can't be all things to all people. So surround yourself with a team. First of all, interview people in the industry. Those who you have been introduced to, those who you have heard about, those who may have some sort of semblance of reputation in the industry, reach out to them and ask them how. Ask them for their counsel. Do not allow ego to get in the way so that you feel embarrassed to do so. No one is great at everything, and everyone may have a piece of advice to give. Don't try to do everything on your own. There are multiple facets to our profession and multiple pieces both of compliance and other that we need to adhere to. And if we truly want to best serve our clients, I believe that we need to bring in others who have an area of expertise that's different from our own. So it may seemingly cost you half of the case or whatever the structure is, but you will potentially make significantly more because those experts will be able to achieve more than what you could on your own. And if you are going to go down that path, protect yourself. So always have a joint work agreement or a collaborative work agreement and a confidentiality agreement. Always, always, always protect yourself.
And are those sorts of agreements readily available to people?
Well, I mean, I certainly have them. I use them all the time. If anyone would want a copy, I'm more than happy to share mine with others. I work with advisors within and outside of our MGA, and I do a lot of international work, so I use them all the time. All the time. So I would just say a joint work agreement that will help to alleviate any potential commission amnesia that somebody may have. Funny what happens when people see dollar signs. And then the confidentiality agreement protects the privacy and the integrity of the client and their files. So be protected, and it requires the signature of both advisors. So they're both acknowledging everything that's being done. It's easier to just protect yourself.
Thank you, Micheline Varas from Customplan Financial. That's been excellent. This is the sort of information that people can benefit from. And the idea of working as part of a team, doing joint work with specialists, is one that I think we may delve into further over the next several months, because it seems to me that many of the people who we've spoken with in this series so far have emphasized this. Next week, we'll be joined by Susan Crazy, and I believe Julian Wise will be interviewing her. I apologize, last week I got our order out, and Julian will be back for the following 2 weeks with David Hull and then Jeffrey Hull, and then I'll be back with Bill Bell, and then Julian will be back with Robert Crowder. So we'll be back into the group insurance world in about 5 more weeks. I thank you for joining us today, and I invite you to join us every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time for the Meet the Masters webinar series. As I said previously, we are recording these and we will be putting them up for viewing once the initial series is done. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Micheline Varas, and thank you, Natasha Wozniak, for the technical assistance.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thanks, Natasha. It's been a pleasure.